So we completed the first chapter of Ecclesiastes, and we saw the preacher, who I believe is Solomon. I'm going to tell you that several times. A lot of people don't, but I don't care what they think. He basically told us everything is vanity, right? What does vanity mean? Yeah, I didn't hear nothing y'all said, but you're probably right. It's a wisp of air. It's smoke, a vapor. It's nothingness. You can't grab onto it. It's meaninglessness in a lot of translations. And Solomon's point is, so far, everything under the sun is vanity. It's temporary. It's like a puff of smoke. Nothing lasts. And therefore, ultimately, nothing under the sun can have permanent meaning or purpose for anything. And we're going to walk through more of that tonight. Chapter 1 said, everything passes away and nothing's going to be remembered. And we talked about that. But we also talked about the context of Ecclesiastes, right? How he is looking, it's looking at the search for, whatever you want to call it, meaning, purpose in life, a reason for existence, or the goal of life. But it's only looking from a human perspective. Solomon is making a thorough examination of everything that man, fallen mankind, tries to find fulfillment and meaning in. And when you try to find the meaning of your life and your purpose and, what gives you we could call it the satisfaction of soul or anything like that, when you look for any of that in the things and anything in creation, you're only going to find that it's a vanity. It's fleeting. It accomplishes nothing. And he walked through the fact from creation. The sun rises and sets, and it's not getting anywhere. Rivers are flowing into the sea, and they're never filling the sea. And we talked about the fact that we're just examining these things from a human perspective. When you break out of that perspective and you find your meaning and your purpose and, the purpose of life and meaning in life in God, then you can say with the psalmist that the heavens declare the glory of God. They are serving a purpose. They do have meaning. And so first, Solomon, whom God had given the greatest wisdom on the planet, and we saw that from 1 Kings, he is trying to discern life's purpose, first of all, by using that wisdom. He used his wisdom to think his way to an answer, and he sought wisdom itself as the highest goal to reach in life, which is what many of the ancient philosophers said was the highest goal in life, was this wisdom. But with the greatest wisdom known to mankind, even wisdom given by God, he found it all to be pointless. And at the end of chapter 1, he said, the more knowledge you have, the more sorrow and vexation grows. There's no way to philosophize, if that's a verb, it is now, your way to unlocking the meaning of life and the purpose to be found in life. The only thing you find if you seek for wisdom as the foundation of your life and the goal of your life is more questions. So now, after defining his experiment, if you want to call it that, and looking through the eyes of wisdom to find meaning and purpose and all of the things that mankind searches for, now in chapter 2, as chapter 2 begins, he's going to turn to pleasure. And he's going to seek to build his life on the foundation of enjoyment and luxury, to see if that will produce the fulfillment that so many think it does. So let's read verses 1 through 11. And I'm just going to walk through this stuff. If you have a question or a comment, some of you might have some insight, you just throw up your hand and we'll stop. Let's read 1 through 11, then we'll go back. He says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, he says, basically, look at this. This is what I found. This also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man," literally the children of Adam, "to do under the heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man." Verse 9 through 11 give us his kind of conclusion. It says, "So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it. And here's the other behold." We saw behold at the beginning. Here's a behold at the end. "And behold," here's the conclusion, "all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun." Optimistic, isn't he? All right. What are some of the main things, and this ought to be easy for us, that people use today chasing after pleasure and happiness to fulfill their lives? Alcohol, yeah.
Money.
Huh?
Money.
Money.
Sex.
Drugs and food. We're going to leave food out because that's kind of my thing. But talk about what bothers y'all, not what bothers me. Anything else? Houses, cars, possessions. Notoriety. Yeah. Having... Huh? People. Yeah, like reputation, like that kind of thing. Anything else? Yeah. What about just comfort? I don't want any kind of turmoil. Anything else y'all can think of? Pretty much everything you said is what we just walked through that text. So just as Solomon said in chapter 1, there really is nothing new under the sun. He basically just, through those verses, is everything y'all said. So right at the beginning of chapter 2, Solomon explains, he's going to first explain his experiment with pleasure, and then he's going to give us the conclusion of his experiment right up front. In verses 1 and 2, he said, "I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. But behold, this is also vanity. I said of laughter it's mad, and of pleasure what use is it?" He aims to test his heart with pleasure. Solomon is testing. He is engaging in what I would call an experiment. He is deliberately attempting to learn whatever he can learn by seeking meaning in the pleasures of this world, the pleasures of this life. If living a life of bliss and luxury is the key to unlocking true fulfillment in life, Solomon is going to push the boundary all the way to the end until he finds that meaning, that purpose. The Hebrew word pleasure here is the word that is translated elsewhere in the Old Testament as joy or gladness or merriment. But here, Solomon is not just hoping to find joy. Make sure you understand that. He intends to make his own personal pleasure and joy the chief goal of his life in this examination. He's going to push the boundary all the way until he explores every avenue of pleasure. Now that sounds pretty extreme to us, but honestly, living for pleasure and comfort is the way lots of people live their lives today. They don't go to the extremes, or not able, don't have the resources to go to the extremes that Solomon went to. But it seems that it is just fallen human nature's bent to say, if I only had this, if I didn't have this trial, if I didn't have this hindrance, if I had more money, if I had an easier job, if I had whatever, I'd finally be happy. I'd finally have meaning. And quite frankly, if we're honest with ourselves, it's an ongoing temptation for all of us, isn't it? We're all tempted to live for ourselves rather than God. And that's basically what Solomon is experimenting with here. Solomon tells us right at the beginning, before he walks through all of these pleasures he tried to find meaning in, he tells us right at the beginning how this experiment ended. He said, I tested my heart with pleasure, and he says, behold, meaning look what I found, living for pleasure is also vanity. It's meaningless. It is a puff of smoke. You can't grab it. His quest failed, and pleasure did not satisfy his soul any more than wisdom did. He says, laughter is mad. Mad here doesn't mean insane or out of your mind, but it's folly, it's foolishness, it's pointless. And again, he tells us that pleasure is vanity. What use is it? There's no goal to it. There's no accomplishment through pleasure. It's fleeting. It's a vapor. Pleasure in and of itself cannot provide any fulfillment or meaning in this life. Now, pleasure is not a bad thing in and of itself. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But here, wrapping your whole identity, your whole meaning, your whole purpose around your own comfort, your own pleasure, your own luxury, that cannot satisfy the soul. It cannot give you the meaning of your life or provide purpose for your life. Joy of heart and pleasure are gifts from God. We'll see that in a moment. But the preacher's examination really discovered that pursuing joy and pleasure, trying to find your meaning, your identity, it's just pointless. It's as pointless as pursuing wisdom and knowledge to find your meaning, to build your life around the goal of your life being to reach the pinnacle of wisdom or reach the pinnacle of pleasure. It cannot accomplish or achieve anything. And we'll see that as we go. Any questions? Okay. So in verses 3 through 8, he's basically just going to list all of the pleasures that he indulged in. And we'll get there when we get there. He's going to give us the details of how he conducted his experiment into pleasure. And the first way he sought after pleasure was, and you said it, intoxication. I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of men to do under heaven during the few days of their life. You see what he's saying? He sought to cheer his body with wine. His quest is to feel good, to intoxicate himself, and to enjoy the pleasure of it. But Solomon isn't just turning into a lush. He's not turning into just a miserable drunk because that's just the way I am. He says his heart was still guiding him with wisdom. He is intentionally testing his thesis that pleasure is the way to find fulfillment. It's the only fulfillment in this life because we're all going to die. He's testing whether living for pleasure is enough to make what he calls the few days of life worthwhile. We're all going to die, so you might as well just live for enjoyment while you can. He's introducing a fact of life that he's going to deal with more extensively later. May be surprising to you, but we are all going to die. Well, unless Jesus returns first. Since this life is so brief, he says a few days. Might as well live for all the pleasure you can. That's not what he's saying is true. That's what he's saying my investigation was going to be into. He said, I searched with my heart through wisdom guiding me how to cheer my body with wine and how to lay hold on folly, on fun, pleasure, and frivolousness living. in order to see what was good for the children of men to do during the few days of their life. You see what he's saying? So first, he tests pleasure in intoxication. But that kind of pleasure, we all know, can't fulfill the longing God has given his image bearers for meaning and purpose. Much later, Solomon would write in Proverbs 20, verse 1, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. His examination, his experiment, proved that there is no meaning to be found in that kind of pleasure. And he's already given us his conclusion. He tells us at the beginning, all this is vanity, it's useless, chasing after the wind. And so he finds that just feeling good, taking things to feel good, bodily, I mean, it's vanity. So some of y'all may not know, but before I was saved, I did a lot of drugs on the music scene and all of that. And my rationale for that was just to feel good, just to feel good, just to escape for a little while, but there's always, and I think this is true with all pleasure, whether sinful or not sinful. What I'm talking about here is sinful. There's a trap that you fall into, and it's with all of the what we might call pleasurable intoxication or anything like that. And when I worked at the hospital, I had these rehab groups that I had to talk to about addiction and all that kind of stuff. And the trap is that these things, especially these sinful things, when you first encounter them, it's just pleasure out the roof. It's just wonderful. I mean, why is everybody not doing this? This is the greatest thing ever. And then as you keep going, the amount of pleasure you get slowly comes down, and the amount of pain you get from it slowly goes up. And before too long, if we're talking about wine or alcohol, before too long, you're not drinking to feel pleasure anymore. You're drinking to keep from feeling pain.
That's right.
And it just locks you into that. And so it's a mocker, meaning that it turns you into a mocker and a fool. But it also is it's also a liar, and the pleasure that it offers is a liar that can never be satisfied. Questions, comments? Oh, I can hear a pin drop. All right. So his quest for pleasure isn't over. Next, he sought to build great works of luxury for himself to find pleasure in. Verses 4 through 6, he said, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kind of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. He is setting out to transform his environment. So not just feeling good on the inside, but everything on the outside. He's transforming his environment in order to maximize the enjoyment that he experiences from it. Make sure you note, Solomon isn't saying, I built these great things to leave a positive legacy for other people, or even for other people to enjoy. He doesn't say that he built public parks. He says he built all these things for himself. You see it? Notice how he says, I made myself all these great and glorious works. They're all for him to use for his pleasure. And all of these things are plural. He made himself houses, vineyards, gardens, parks. He filled them with fruit-bearing trees. I mean, it sounds like he is trying to create a Garden of Eden for himself in this fallen world. He is trying to recreate the bliss and the paradise that Adam enjoyed before the garden. Whether he's doing that consciously or not, I don't know. But it's the same language. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that the words plant, water, and make are the same words used in Genesis 2. But in Genesis, it was God who created the paradise for Adam. God created it for his glory. Here, Solomon makes them for himself, creating this little ideal world around him for himself to enjoy. Solomon made every part of his surroundings a place that sole purpose is to please him. And the hope, I think, in his experiment was that living in absolute luxury, finding pleasure bodily through this intoxication, and we'll see in a minute sex and partying and singing and all those things, and outwardly in all of his surroundings being beautiful and luxurious and like a paradise. All of the sole purpose of it all was to give you pleasure and comfort. And then he could finally sit back and say, this is what life is all about. But Solomon didn't stop there either. He sought to he sought his fulfillment in amassing great wealth so that there was nothing that he wanted for. In verse 7 and 8 it says, I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. He bought slaves to wait on him hand and foot in his garden paradise. There were even slaves born in his house, meaning he had an abundance of them. Solomon lived a life of complete and absolute luxury, unhindered with any of the mundane or trivial toils of living. It was all done for him. He built this complete paradise around himself. He was pampered by a host of servants. He had more animals and herds than anyone had ever had. And that doesn't just show that he was rich. It also shows that he never denied any pleasure to himself of food and feasting. In 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 23, we read that Solomon was so wealthy, he feasted every day. In that text, it says Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 fat oxen, 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fattened fowl. That's a feast, my friends. Every day. What's the difference between a deer and a roebuck? I don't know. Everybody's pulling out their phones. Google doesn't count. You need to know. I don't know what a roebuck is, unless it's connected to Sears. Huh? Smaller? I don't know. I'm asking you. I have no idea. I have no idea what a roebuck is. But Solomon was eating them. Whatever it is, he was eating them. That's a lot of food. Solomon feasted. So think about this. He cheered his body with wine day after day after day. He built this paradise around him with gardens and parks and fruit trees and just all of these things. He had gold and silver, just tons and tons and tons of it. We'll see that in a moment. He feasted and enjoyed his feasts every single day. And he was able to do this. A lot of people today, even, some of us are bent toward seeking after comfort and pleasure, but not to this level. I mean, this is the pinnacle. This is pushing the boundary of all the pleasure you could possibly have at one time in one lifetime. And he managed to do all of this because, as you well know, Solomon had more gold than you could possibly imagine. He was so wealthy. And it was given to him by God. Remember, he asked for wisdom. God said, I'm going to give you wisdom. And because you asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you all these riches too. In verse 8b, the second part of verse 8, he said, I gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. Money was no issue for Solomon. Whatever he wanted, he got. And then the text goes on to say that he got singers, his courts, this paradise that he was in. His courts and his private rooms were just filled with music. I mean, people sing it. Like, remember, there's no radio. So this is a lifestyle of food and wine and women and luxury and being waited on hand and foot and music and frivolity and what we would probably call parties all the time and feasts every day. This is his life in this experiment to seek out pleasure as meaning. Solomon's every sense was bombarded with pleasure, and it all centered around him. He made himself the center of the universe as far as everything and everyone around him was concerned. And at the end of verse 8, in a very obscure way, it's difficult to translate in Hebrew, we're told that Solomon also indulged in the pleasures of sex. He had many concubines. And then it says, the delight of the sons of man. There's some debate about how that phrase should be translated. Anybody have a different translation? Pretty much the same. It's very difficult to translate, and I am certainly not a Hebrew scholar. But one commentator says this: however you translate it, it is a crude reference to women who are used for sexual pleasure only. You know, in 1 Kings 10, you see this long description of all Solomon's wealth. Gold and riches. I think gold is mentioned 18 times in 1 Kings 10. This long, it's breathtaking how rich this guy was. How rulers from other nations showered him with wealth. But right after 1 Kings 10, shockingly enough, comes 1 Kings 11. Where we're told that Solomon loved all of these foreign women. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's a lot. Just saying. I pulled out my calculator this afternoon. Not for that. If you had 700 wives, that's 1,000 women. Let's just say it that way. 1,000 women. Theoretically, if Solomon slept with a different woman every night, he would not see the first woman again for 2.5 years. Yeah. But 1 Kings 11, talking about all these women, these 700 wives, 300 concubines, it also tells us that these women and their pagan worship of gods led to his spiritual downfall and the dividing of his kingdom. It brought about because of his, appetite. It brought the split of his kingdom. So all of this shows us that there is no earthly pleasure Solomon did not have in abundance. He reached the pinnacle of self-centered pleasure and luxury. There was absolutely no thing that Solomon could say, I wish I had that, and was not able to get it. So, all day, every day, I find pleasure in cheering my heart with wine. I have feasts every day. I have more gold than you could ever spend. And I use it to build this world around me that is all focused on me. Servants tending to my every need. Singers, music in the background. Concubines. He had it all from a worldly perspective. Yet in verses 9 through 11, he will say as much as he will say that he had it all and he denied himself nothing, but he's also going to tell us the results of his foray into the heights of pleasure and the conclusion that he reaches. So it says, so I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. He says, also my wisdom remained with me. So remember, he didn't just become a stupid fool that is captured by these things. He is doing these things intentionally to seek out the meaning of life. He says, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, which is interesting. And all the things, was my reward for all my toil. Now, let's walk through this, and then we'll get what he says in verse 11 as the conclusion. So not only did he have more and experience more than anyone ever had, or probably ever did after that, but through it all, he says, my wisdom was still with me. Meaning he was still serious about conducting this experiment, about seeking the boundaries of pleasure to find the meaning of life. He wasn't just going with the flow. He wasn't just living for himself because that's what he wanted to do. He was living for himself intentionally, pushing the boundaries of pleasure as far as it could possibly go to see if the greatest pleasures in this life would reveal a purpose to life, a meaning to life. He was testing whether all of this pleasure and comfort was worth living for, whether all of this pleasure and this comfort was a worthy goal for my life. And so in the spirit of that investigation, he says, there was nothing that my eyes or my heart wanted that I didn't get. Whatever he wanted, he took. Whatever temptation he had, he indulged, sinful or otherwise. He denied himself of nothing to search out whether pure pleasure is a worthy goal of life. And make sure you notice this. This is really important. The end of verse 10 tells us that Solomon did find pleasure in his toil. And the pleasure he found was the reward for all his toil. You see it? He did experience pleasure in his gardens and his partying and presumably even his sinful indulgence. Pleasure is what he was using to find meaning, and he found all the pleasure he could possibly want. So to say there is no pleasure in in any of these things is not what Solomon says. He says, yes, there was pleasure in it. And the pleasure that I received from all of this was the reward for my toil. Sin is fun for a season. And there are many earthly pursuits, both good and sinful, that people can find pleasure in. So he says this pleasure that I experienced in all these things, it was the reward of my toil. He got what he was looking for. But in the final analysis, Solomon says, this reward that I got, it was not worth the price. Verse 11 says, then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it. And here's the conclusion. Behold, useless. It's all vanity, striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained. I experienced all the pleasure that I could experience. And I did get pleasure from all my houses and all my gardens and all my stuff. He says, but there was no point in it. There was no gain in it. There was no profit in it. Solomon did experience pleasure as he sought after all these things under the sun. But when he looks back and considers it all in the realm of his experiment, there was nothing to be gained. Pleasure was a fleeting, vain enterprise that could not fulfill, that could not last. Pleasure and comfort it's a never-ending hunger that cannot be satisfied. All his efforts to seek out pleasure had not given him a sufficient return on his investment, is what he's saying. So Solomon says pleasure is just as limited as wisdom in what it can provide. Chasing the pleasures of this life will never give meaning and fulfillment of life. God has designed us for much more than that. But we have a hard time grasping that reality, especially when we're experiencing the opposite of pleasure and comfort. Many of you probably have read this, but in his book, The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis said this: our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. God is not a killjoy. It's not that pleasure in and of itself or joy in and of itself is wrong. It's not. It's not that you are not allowed to find pleasure in creation or in family or in the good things of life that are pleasurable. We need to make sure we rightly understand what Solomon is saying, not just here, but all through the book. Taking pleasure in the things of this life is a gift of God that God intends us to enjoy. There's nothing wrong with finding comfort and pleasure in all the blessings that God has given. But pleasure is not something to chase after as an end to itself. It is not. Seeking after pleasure can't be the meaning of your life. It can't give you the fulfillment of life. It will always be a fleeting pursuit. So as Solomon conducts his experiment, frankly, this is all fascinating for us, and I don't think that I've said anything tonight that you wouldn't have already agreed with before you came in here. But it's not intended to just be educational for us, watching him conduct this experiment. Solomon's words speak through time to us today, maybe more than any other people in history. So today in this country, we have it all. Now, of course, we don't have all Solomon had, and we still struggle financially in other ways, and we still have trials, and we still have all those things. We don't have the resources he had to build a whole world around ourselves. But aside from a relatively few notable and great rulers and rich people in history, the vast majority of the masses throughout history and around the world today would look at us and say, "What are you guys complaining about? You got it made." Today we have more technology and communication and more access to entertainment than even 20 years ago. And with all of the things directed at making our lives easier and entertaining and making us happy, are people happier today? Not statistically, they're not. Here's a chart from StatBase that measures people's happiness from 2007 to 2025. You notice the trend? In June of 2007, do you know what came out for the first time? That's exactly right. Look at you with the big brain on Frank. The iPhone. 2007. First iPhone was released. Netflix first announced their full streaming service in 2007. And since then, now we have high-speed internet, a world of entertainment and information at our fingertips. We have AI since 2022 or so. And yet there is still this clear trend on this chart of happiness specifically in America, but in the world at large, going downhill. So is the iPhone and the social media, is it evil? Is it causing us to live? No. I mean, it can be, don't get me wrong. But not in and of itself. The advance of technology and the things that make life easier and more comfortable for us. Dana bought a washer dryer that's one thing. Like you just put your stuff in there, and when it comes out, it's washed and dried. Yeah, no, it don't fold them. It won't be long though. We'll have something like that. Makes life easier. I mean, they say it does. It takes like 6 hours to do a load, but whatever. The point is this. iPhones are not wrong. I got one. Social media is not wrong in and of itself. You can use it for evil. And it is a lot of evil on it, but it's not evil in and of itself. Technology is not causing our decline in happiness. In fact, there was a man, I wish I could think of his name. I think his name is Easterbrook. That may not be right. He wrote a book called The Paradox of Progress. And the point of the book, he's not a Christian or anything, but the point of the book was as life gets better for humanity, happiness declines. Pleasure pursued for its own sake does not and cannot satisfy the soul. But we just keep on thinking that it can. If I just had more. If I just had a different job. If I just got the next thing. If I could just get this trial off me. If I could just get this worry off of me. Life would be just so fulfilling. No, it won't. There's always going to be dissatisfactions with this life. Why?
Because our hearts want it.
Because our hearts want it, for sure. But what we saw in chapter 1, the crooked things can't be made straight. God has cursed this creation because of sin, and it is fallen, and it is broken, and it will always be until Jesus comes back and makes it right. There will always be dissatisfactions with life, and God made these crooked things as a result of sin so they would point us back to God. And whenever we put ourself first, we will not only fail to satisfy self, but ultimately you'll never find the true purpose in life, the true pleasure of life. So Ecclesiastes is here to tell us that the love of the world or its pleasures cannot give you your meaning or your identity. Pleasure as a goal in life is meaningless. It's chasing after the wind. You'll never catch it. There'll always be more. And there'll always be, our hearts are always hungry for more. But here's the thing. When we turn to God through Jesus and we find our meaning in Him, something surprising happens. When Christ gives us true meaning in our lives, and He is the foundation of our value and our identity, then we are freed to truly enjoy the pleasures of this life because they're gifts from God. So we aren't talking about sinful pleasure here. Now make sure you understand that. But we recognize God has given us all things to enjoy. How do I know that? Well, the Bible tells me that. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, Paul's talking about rich people, poor people in church. He says, "And for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God." Set your hopes on God, look, "who richly provides us with everything to enjoy." It's not wrong to enjoy wealth. It's not wrong to enjoy fun or frivolity sometimes. It's not wrong to enjoy the creation and the beauty of creation. God is not trying to squash all of your pleasure in this life. He wants to give us the pleasures of this life and the blessings of this life to enjoy. But we have a tendency to love the gift more than the gift giver. But once we learn how to find our satisfaction in God, our soul satisfaction is what I mean, then we're able to find real pleasure in all of these gifts that He's given us. So we don't pursue pleasure for its own sake or make pleasure or comfort the main goal of life, because it can never be. But we receive pleasure as a gift from God, because as Jesus says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul? And next week, Solomon's going to talk more about wisdom, but more about not just wisdom as a goal in itself, but living wisely. And he's going to say that wisdom and knowledge and joy is a gift from God. And he is going to say that we are to enjoy our work in this life because it is a gift from God. So you have to read Ecclesiastes in the context of the arguments that Solomon is making. It's not just you take this one part and life has no meaning. You might as well just forget it, don't do anything because everything stinks and it's never going to get no better. But if you don't take the end of the argument in it where he turns and says, but God gives you, he brings God into the picture, and then all of a sudden he says, yes, you can enjoy. You can enjoy your work. You can enjoy the things that God gives. Because God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. Those are the three things in the next section he's going to say God gives. And those are the three things that all the way up until this point he said were vanity. Remember? Wisdom is vanity. He lumped knowledge in that. He said, the more knowledge you have, the more vexation you have. And joy, enjoyment, pleasure is vanity, he says. And then in the very next section, the end of chapter 2, you can read it when you get home. He says, because God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. It comes from his hand. Questions, comments, cries of outrage? Dixie, you got something for the class? She wants to know if Solomon got fat eating all that food. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, Lyle, then Janet.
He started scattering the wealth. He was the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
Back in
Really? Wow. Y'all hear that? John D. Rockefeller, richest man in the world at the time, on his deathbed, they asked, what can we get you? And he said, more. About Howard Hughes, guy rich beyond belief, and he went nuts, died in a hotel room. Janet, then Brian.
So,
Janet.
no, it's okay.
Go ahead, Janet.
So one thing that I noticed while reading through this and reading Ecclesiastes in general, I think a lot of times we tend to focus on Solomon and those riches that he talks about. But in this passage, 58 times he's referring to first person, either I, me, my,
Sure.
myself. And so we need to remember that even though we're not the king, right, the human heart seeks for pleasure, satisfaction, and glory.
Sure.
And so the hermit is seeking pleasure in his aloneness. A person who seeks peace, is pride and their content with peace.
Mhm.
And you also have that person that is seeking to find pleasure in giving their wealth and giving their money away. And the point is, seeking pleasure, whether it be in those those interesting things that Solomon speaks of, anything that we're seeking of that is bringing pleasure to ourselves and not God. I think sometimes we lose that because we don't have all
Sure.
the cattle and all of the
Right.
Robux to eat.
Right. Yeah, Janet basically said, we don't have all the stuff Solomon had, but we try to seek for pleasure in all kind of different things, whether it's charity or being alone or, you can live for pleasure in a million different ways, the things that please you. Absolutely. I agree completely. Brian?
You said that God, or Solomon asked for wisdom, God granted that, and riches. But wouldn't you stand a pretty good chance of being rich if you're wise?
I mean, so yeah, he asked, wouldn't you stand a good chance of being rich if you're wise? I think as a general rule, probably. I don't think it's guaranteed, though. I don't think it's guaranteed that if you are a wise person, you'll be rich. But, just generally speaking, the wise person, the hardworking person, that person ends up, you won't be Solomon rich probably, but you'll be comfortable, I would think. I mean, that's just as a general principle. It's not guaranteed by any stretch. Anything else? Rich?
It's what you do with it when you get to that point.
Sure.
And that's Brian's right. Wisdom should allow you to build your riches so you can make the right decisions most of the time, all the time. Especially with Solomon.
Well,
That's
yeah.
what I give it now. So
Yeah.
he's making all the right decisions, but it's really not, because this experiment is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, it's not a wise thing to do.
It's a teaching moment.
So, but what you said was, it's say that first part again. You said, if you're wisdom, you can build your
You can build your riches.
All I heard was he said I was right.
Just take the W and move on. That's right. Interesting though. So, and here's the balance. This is what we need to watch for, because we're going to work through Ecclesiastes. And I think you're right. If you're a wise person and you do things wisely, we're talking, not just biblically wise, but wise. You are liable to build riches. But the very next section, read it when you get home, the end of chapter 2, it says it don't matter, because we're all going to die, and you're going to leave all your riches to a fool. You're going to leave, it could be a fool. You can't take it with you, basically, is what he's going to say. And so the point he's making is he is going to systematically take apart every single thing in principle. He's not going to mention every single thing but in principle, he's going to take apart every single thing that fallen human beings try to live for and build their life on and find meaning in. And he's going to show that it's all vanity, it's all meaningless, it's all useless. And so the ultimate it's useless outside of God. The ultimate thing he's going to say at the end of chapter 2. Somebody read chapter 2, verse 24 through 26. Let's just go on and read it. I'm talking about it, and I ain't. You have to read it out loud. Very loud.
There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind.
Okay, everybody hear that? If you didn't, I'm sorry. It's chapter 2, verse 24 through 26, and it's the end of the argument that we're going to look at next week. And basically, he brings God into the equation for the first time. He mentioned God earlier, but he brings him into the equation. And basically, all of the things that he just said were meaningless and pointless and vanity. He said, now, there's nothing better in this life than to enjoy these things. And it says God gives you the ability to enjoy them. So they are all meaningless and all vanity and all pointless and useless until we bring God into the equation. And then he says God gives you the ability to enjoy these things. For the one who pleases God, he gives wisdom and knowledge and joy and all those things. And so when you're looking at all these bleak passages, always keep the end of the conclusion in focus. Okay? Anything else? All right, let's pray. God, we love you. We thank you for your word. God, it's a very difficult book. There are very difficult truths in the book. Very difficult things for us to even wrap our minds around. God, ultimately, we pray that you would just show us where our idols are, that you would reveal wickedness in our heart as David cried out to you, that you would turn our hearts and lives to find our ultimate peace and joy and fulfillment and satisfaction of soul in you alone. And God, we thank you for the gifts of enjoying your blessings in this life, enjoying the enjoyments that you give through creation and family and pleasure and all of the things. God, you are the source of all goodness. You are the source of who we are. And you are owed all praise and glory and worship. And so, God, even in our work, even in our toil, even in the things that we do, the mundane things, God, help us to do all for your glory and your name. And God, find enjoyment in you through it. We thank you and we love you in Jesus' name. Amen.